Hello and welcome to this final episode of the Smart Split series. For anyone who is new here, I'm Nicole Farrow, a relationship and family coach specialising in co-parenting and blending families. And I'm joined by my co-host, Samantha Woodham, who is the co-founder of The Divorce Surgery and also a family barrister who is going to share with us all her wonderful expertise. So today we are covering how to introduce a new partner successfully to your children and to your family. And as I said, this is the last in the current series of the Smart Split series.
Well, so I'm going to kick this off because I can see we've already got some questions in. And one of them is the question I think I'd ask if I had my time with you on this topic, Nicole. And it's this, it's a broad one, but it's how do you successfully introduce a new partner? So you've separated, you've met somebody, you've got children, and you're panicking. What do you do?
Yeah, so this is probably the thing that I deal with most, because even the best co-parenting relationships can feel like it kind of upsets the apple cart when you have someone new come in, just because it's something new and it's another adjustment and it's another thing that the family's got to deal with, and that's for all of you, not just the children. So it's really worth taking your time and making sure that this is a partner you definitely want to introduce. And I get asked sort of what's the minimum time frame, and there really isn't one. But I would say you need to make sure that it's, you're very serious about this relationship and perhaps, looking to take it to the next level before perhaps introducing them to your family. And I would say really enjoy the honeymoon stage. We've kind of really rushed that in this kind of giddiness about this new relationship, but actually just enjoy that bit, because the introduction to your family can be quite challenging. So, don't rush it. And actually, the best thing that you can do is introduce them to your ex-partner first. Now, depending on your relationship with your ex-partner will depend whether you can, actually set up a meeting where they can meet, or whether you just need to tell them about the fact that you've met someone new and that you would like to introduce them to the children. But don't skip this step, because it's really, really crucial in terms of, if it was boot on the other foot, this is somebody who's going to come in and spend time with your children and is going to potentially have quite a big role in your children's lives. You want to know who that person is that they're going to be spending time with. And you want to, from just from your own comfort. And also, I think there's always that fear of, oh, I'm going to be replaced. And actually, that kind of fear is much bigger if you haven't met the other person. And actually, there is a space for all of you in a family. But I think having the ability to kind of just meet and, not create this kind of really scary image of someone coming in and taking your children away from you, same, fears that come up when you get divorced initially. So I think really kind of thinking about your ex's perspective and introducing them is really, really key. And I think that anybody would want that as a parent, to know who their children are going to be spending time with. So I think it's just a mutual respect and courtesy, really. And also, you don't want your ex sort of throwing hand grenades over the fence either. You want them to be encouraging your children to have a relationship with your new partner. You don't want to create any animosity from the get-go by being disrespectful to your ex-partner, by not letting them know first. And as I said, if possible, even introducing them is even better. And then when it comes to actually introducing the kids to your partner, again, just take it really slowly and don't rush it. And I think this is the thing that kind of comes up a lot. It's just the speed in which it all happens, and it doesn't allow your ex-partner or your children to kind of come round to the idea. So firstly, I would mention it. I would then give them a few weeks or however long it takes to kind of get their head around it. And this is where having told your ex is really helpful. So when they go home and they talk to mum or dad about the fact that you've met someone new, they're like, yes, I know, and actually I've met them, or I've spoken to them, or I think that they're a really good person, I think you're going to get on, but you don't have to meet them straight away. They can then be really supporting your children from the other side as well. So you can actually do this as parents. But so introduce the idea first, and then when you do the first meeting, make it on neutral ground. It's a park date, it's a coffee, it's something that's no more than like an hour. It gives them an opportunity to meet them, but they're not kind of being forced upon them. Don't do a weekend, the next weekend you have, you know, you're spending the whole weekend with them and they're being packed off to bed and you're sitting up with your new partner in the living room. Like, that's a terrible situation for a child to be in, because the same as parents, we fear losing our children. Children fear losing their parents, and the introduction of a new partner raises this, okay, so now am I not going to get my one-on-one time with mum or dad because they've now got this new person and I'm losing my parents? So actually think about kind of just doing it really gradually. Do a, instead a part date or a coffee or whatever, and then, or a walk, and then come away with them and spend quality time with your children and let them ask any questions that they have, and gradually introduce and increase the time. Don't do it all at once. Don't rush in. I know it's really tempting when you're in a new relationship and, you know, or, you know, things are getting serious, but you've got to think about going at the pace of the kind of lowest denominator in order to bring everybody along. And ultimately you want this to be successful. So, and if you're really serious about this person not going anywhere, then, you know, you're not against the clock here. You've got time to do that and bring it all together. And the other thing I would say is put it into a plan before this ever occurs. Agree with your co-parent how you're going to handle this, and think about how long you want to both have been with a partner before introducing them, how you then want to go about putting these steps in place and making sure that you can both support each other in this new kind of stage in your family's kind of journey moving forward.
Brilliant. That was so helpful, Nicole. I don't know if we've got any legal questions popping up that I can help with.
We have, yes. So the first one is, obviously I've said introduce them to your ex, and you know it's important that they get on, but that's not always the case. So we've had a question in, if my ex has got a new partner, what legally can I do about them being introduced or not being introduced? Is there any kind of, you know, because if you're the partner who hasn't got a new partner, if you're the parent, sorry, who hasn't got a new partner, it's your ex, it can feel like all the decision making is with the your ex and their new partner and not you. So we've had a question, what can I do about it legally? Do I have any standing in terms of how that's handled?
Okay, so the short answer is it's hard to stop, and I think it's really important to know that. So you know, your kind of nuclear option is go to court and try and get a judge to make a prohibited steps order to stop your child being introduced to this new partner. That is not going to happen. A judge isn't going to do it unless you can establish this person poses a risk, which is very high legal burden. And the reality is that you're feeling the way you're feeling because something is being imposed on you. It's your children. It's the most emotive thing in the world. And your ex-partner clearly is not being respectful in the way that they're going about this, that you're feeling the need to take those sorts of legal steps. But I think it's important to know what a judge would expect, because then you can present that to your ex, and a judge would expect exactly as you've set out, Nicole, you know, assuming that both of you have parental responsibility, which most parents do, and even if they don't, a court will expect this, consult with each other. You know, introducing a new partner is a really big step, and you should be consulting each other in advance, provided it's safe to do so. You should be meeting the ex-partner before your children do. You should have a plan for how that introduction is going to take place. Just as you said, Nicole, light touch. You know, this is when the kids first meet them, it's in the park, it's out, it's not in the home, it's gradual. And I think the point to make to, you know, the ex who's maybe running ahead of themselves, super excited, is like, this is happening, I'm afraid. This is the person I love. They're meeting the children next weekend. They could really come unstuck, because if they run too fast with this and the children don't like it and the children don't react well, what can happen is that the children then reject that person. And the children say, I don't want to go and stay with mum, or I don't want to go and stay with dad because I don't like the new partner. And then suddenly the whole thing really does implode. And it's the thing I say to clients about, you know, oh, I'm going to go to court to enforce a contact order, or I'm going to go to court to go from 3 nights a week to 4 nights a week, whatever it is, because that really matters to me. And it's like, okay, well, where are we going to get you? What can a court process get you? Ultimately, it can get you a piece of paper. It can get you a piece of paper, which is a court order, which says now you've got 4 nights a week. But that doesn't get your children to come to you if they don't want to come. You've then got an enforcement nightmare. So I think it's about saying to your ex in this situation, not, I'm going to take you to court if you introduce the ex-partner, but actually legally we have an obligation to consult with each other before this happens. So I want us to sit down and have a coffee together. I then want to meet your partner. I want us to formulate a plan. If our relationship is such that we're really not talking very well at the moment, let's get somebody like you, Nicole, involved, even for just one meeting, to try and facilitate that discussion. But the underlying point, without saying I'll go to court, is this is how a judge would expect us to react, because this is the way that we're going to bring our children along with us. And our children need us both on board with this, because otherwise they're going to pick up on the tension and this whole thing could unravel. And that's not good for either of you. Nobody wants to end up in stressful court proceedings about their children. So I think that the short answer is you can't stop it, but you can manipulate it and be more in control than you think you are to how your children are introduced.
Yeah, this is such a good point, because as you say, once opinions are created, they're very, very difficult to step back from. And I notice this especially with children, and depending on the age, if they're teenagers, they will fall on their sword over the fact that they will not bend. And and then actually you're wanting this to be a really happy time, and you're wanting people to meet your new partner and them to be part of your family, but it's in the handling of this bit that if it's not done right, it causes so much pain for so many years, for your partner, for your children.
And it's
such a shame.
And it's double-edged as well, because if you get a situation where a child takes a very, children have very black and white thinking.
Yeah.
And if you get a situation where a child of, say, 10 or 11 is suddenly adamant that, one parent is right on all things and the other parent is wrong on all things, and so parent B is rejected, then yes, in the short term, parent A might think, well, maybe this is just how it was meant to be. But then that child reaches maturity and they become an adult themselves, and they reflect back on the opinions they had as a 10 or 11-year-old. And they can then turn against parent A. They can turn against that parent and say to them, why didn't you educate me better that this was a more nuanced decision? Why did you allow me to reject my other parent? And then it can turn into a rejection. So it's really important not to think, oh, well, if my child doesn't want to see him or her because of the new partner, that's their choice. It's actually here about educating children that these are really nuanced decisions and that nobody's right, nobody's wrong. We've just got to get through this new transition and take the benefits from it. Ultimately, this is another adult in the world who cares about you, and they're not replacing anybody else, but they could be another source of fun.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing as well, isn't it? Because when people want to get to that blended setup, and the blended setup says that there is a role for everyone, and that you don't have, I'm completely blended in my family. I don't have two mums. I have a mum and I have a stepmom, and they're very different, and they don't tread on each other's toes, and I don't go to them for the same things, and I don't have the same relationship with them, but there's actually room for both. And I'm much better, and I think I'm very fortunate to have both of them in my life, as are the rest of my siblings who feel exactly the same. And to the point where my parents had a terrible co-parenting relationship when I was growing up, until I got to an adult. I'm the youngest, and now they got on fine, and my mum actually goes and stays with my stepmom for weekends. My dad's sadly no longer with us, but they've got to that point because they're very aware that they're not in competition with one another, and actually they never have been. So there is room for everyone, no matter what your co-parenting relationship has been, or whatever the history is there. Actually blending families can be as you quite rightly say, it's another person who loves you. It's a bigger family, and there's plenty to go around. So we do have another question, and this time it's about the finances. So
yeah,
and this comes up a lot with my clients as well. If you have a new partner, does that impact the finances?
So in terms of entitlement to, so essentially, you know, when it comes to sharing, so your entitlement to the matrimonial assets that were generated during the marriage, the fact that you've got a new partner that you're living with is irrelevant in terms of your entitlement to sharing, but it can impact a needs assessment. So if you're in a situation where you're receiving spousal maintenance, and that will be calculated on the basis of your needs. So if your ex-husband or ex-wife earned more than you and they're paying you some maintenance in order for you to be able to afford to pay your outgoings on the home, pay a mortgage, you know, in addition to child maintenance. This is separate from child maintenance. But if you then have a new partner move in, they may well turn around and say, well, hang on, you've now got another source of contribution to your outgoings. You know, you've got somebody contributing to the utility bills, maybe paying some of the mortgage or the rent. So I want to reduce my maintenance to reflect that. Now, I think what's really important to know is that that's never going to be automatic. So you'd never have a situation in a court order where if somebody moved in with you, your maintenance will automatically go down. And that's because judges recognize that there is a big difference between a relationship where you're living together and a relationship where you're married. And the big difference is obviously if you're living together, a relationship breaks down, you've got no legal claims over each other. That person could just move out and suddenly you're there needing to cover all the utilities again. So again, it's really about having a kind of grown-up discussion about it and saying, look, you know, my partner, I think they're going to move in. I just want you to know. And then being prepared for the fact that your ex might say, okay, well, can we look at maintenance again? Or if you're in the situation where you've got a measure order, which means that your ex has a sort of share of the family home once it's sold in the future. Depending on how that mesh has been arranged, it may be that you've still got a joint mortgage or you've still got some joint responsibilities. Again, they may want to look at that. And you can say, yeah, fine, we can have a conversation about it. Maybe you want to get some legal advice on it. I'd always say get some legal advice. But I think it's really important to know that nobody should take any unilateral steps. This is about a conversation to reflect, okay, maybe, you know, in the same way that if you got a lodger, you know, maybe I've got an increased income, you've got a promotion, like there is more money coming in. That may mean that your maintenance goes down for the duration of that relationship, but then the maintenance might have to go up again if the relationship breaks down.
Okay.
But that's the only real kind of impact in terms of finances, but it's important to be aware of.
Yeah. And then we've also had another question, which is it's the opposite. So it's in reverse. So if my ex has a new partner, does that impact finances? So is there any difference if you're in that situation?
So in terms of if you're the one paying maintenance, then it's the stuff I've said before. So it may well cause you, if you're paying maintenance to your ex and they've got somebody who's new partner who's moved in and that new partner, you know, has a job and is earning a decent amount, is contributing, then I think it's completely fair enough to be saying, look, can we have a conversation about spousal maintenance? The other scenario to be aware of is if you are, so if your ex, say your ex's new partner is, so your ex is paying maintenance to you, so you're receiving maintenance, and your ex ends up going into a relationship with like the owner of Tesla or something, who's like a billionaire.
That's the question we've had, that scenario.
Yeah, then that's not going to entitle you to any more maintenance. So, you know, your needs are judged on the standard of living that you had during the marriage. If you're negotiating finances at the moment, I think the other thing to be aware of is, you know, when you're doing your Form E, there is a section in the Form E about whether you're cohabiting or intending to cohabit in the next 6 months. And if you tick yes to either of those, there's then a section at the end that you'd need the new partner's consent to fill in, but it asks about the assets and income of that cohabitee, of the new partner. So again, if you're in a situation where your ex has had somebody move in, they've got a new relationship, again, it's perfectly fair to have the conversation and say, look, in your Form E, I would like you to complete the basics. It can be very emotive, but just knowing that it's in the Form E, and the reason it's in the Form E is because the court needs to assess everybody's needs. And in order to see what your outgoings are and how your outgoings are going to be met, it is really relevant if there's somebody else in one household who's contributing financially. So that's why it's relevant. And I always think sometimes to open up the conversation, to make it less loaded, that for me is quite helpful, because you can say, look, this is something that's in the legal disclosure document. So there's a reason it's there. This isn't about me going after your new partner's wealth. I've got no interest in that, but it is relevant for the court to know and for me to know how much they can contribute to your outgoings, because that may impact, how we divide up, how much mortgage we can each take, how much maintenance you might be able to pay, all of those sorts of things. It becomes relevant. And again, if you're somebody with a new partner and actually they're not contributing anything, or they're not in a position to contribute anything financially, then just get it out there so that it's known, and then it's not an issue.
And just on that point, Sam, just thinking about what you said a minute ago about the biggest impacts if you're married versus if you're just cohabitating with your new partner. But on the Form E, it doesn't say about being married. It just says whether you're looking to cohabit in the next 6 to 12 months. So they don't differentiate with the marriage element that you were talking about earlier.
So they don't in terms of the financial disclosure. So obviously the financial disclosure exercise, the Form E, is just getting all the maths in, getting all the numbers in, so that then they can be analysed and the judge or your lawyer can work out what a fair outcome is. But in working out a fair outcome, the judge or a lawyer, if I were advising on this, would be very aware that somebody living with you can just leave and you have no legal entitlement to pursue them. So that's why it's treated differently than if you were remarried. So if you have a situation where you've got a cohabitee and they're living with you, and say they're contributing £800 a month, right, towards the outgoings, and that's in the bank statements and it's all super clear, that's relevant. But it's not necessarily going to affect the outcome in the same way as a remarriage would. With that sort of income. So it's more just making sure that everybody knows what the financial picture looks like. Generally, courts will be reluctant to take into account cohabitees' income, right? Because they really want this couple to be able to live independently, not reliant on anybody else, and meet their own needs. But you do have situations where money's really tight. And it's a kind of question of, can the family home be retained for a short period, maybe get the children to the end of primary school? How could we do it? Oh, actually, that extra £500 a month could make a difference. Let's see how we can put it into the mix, but also protect that person if the relationship breaks down, that sort of thing. So it's relevant, but it's definitely not determinative.
That's really helpful.
Actually, you can see we've got a question pop up for you, actually, Nicole, so I'm out of the hot seat. The next question is, this is a good one, actually. Okay, so what if you're a step parent? So we've got somebody listening in here who's a kind of new step parent, new partner. What can they do? Any tips to really do the right thing, make this work for the children and for the ex?
Yeah, I would say I would try and encourage your partner to do that introduction between you and the ex and support that and be willing to have that conversation. And it's really kind of reassuring, the other parent that you're not there to, as I said, tread on toes, that, you're in this relationship, but very aware that there are children, and that, you're all kind of wanting to be part of the family, but not kind of come in as a new, you know, force to be reckoned with or anything like that. And I think, you know, really encouraging that communication and supporting your partner in navigating this, I think, is really key. But in terms of meeting the children, I would say just make it really organic and natural. Don't get overexcited and tell them everything that you know about them. Let them explain who they are and build that relationship with you. I think we can get quite, because we want to make a good impression, you can end up kind of overdoing it a little bit and ending up coming across a bit overbearing and saying everything that your partner has told you about their children, and actually let the children tell you themselves. And just try not to take too much to heart. I think there's a bit of a stereotype about step parents, but just try and, you know, see it as meeting, if you're meeting friends' children, don't put so much pressure on yourselves. I think doing the park dates, you know, the out in a neutral environment for an hour actually gives you a time to pace yourself as much as the children, and just allow that relationship to blossom organically. Don't kind of overdo it. Try and meet the ex-partner beforehand, support your partner in it, and don't take too many things to heart, is what I would say. And also try and find other
I love
these, because it's so hard, I think, and it can feel really isolating, but, you know, try and find other step parents who are in the same sort of situation. I think we need a bit more of a community to chat around some of this stuff and realize that actually probably what you're experiencing is quite normal. And it's you.
And it's so funny, isn't it, when I listen to all of this from you, it's, as a parent, there's so much you can take from this, you know, in terms of just reflecting on the way you are with your own children, whether you're a parent or a step parent. It's like so much of it is adult led, and so little is just open, how are you feeling type questions. You know, we make so many assumptions about how our children are feeling and what they need. And I know, speaking for myself, so rarely ask the question. And I think that even just reflecting on, how step parents cope, there's still so much that we can all learn, because we're all navigating really the same journey in terms of just trying to get this right for these children.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody wants this to be a success. You know, even the ex doesn't want their children to, you know, have to really struggle with a new step parent. Nobody wants that for their children. Nobody wants this to fail. And I think that goes to the children as well. They want mum and dad to be happy, even if mum and dad aren't happy together. You know, there's such a better outcome for everyone if we just kind of keep that in mind and just don't rush in to, you know, feet first. So.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks so much, Nicole. Oh, we're out of time now. Thanks, everyone. So that was the last in the current series of the Smart Split. But it's actually been really fun, and you've all been super engaged. So I think watch this space, because we might do another series later in the year. But for the time being, if there's any of the episodes that you missed, that you want catch-ups on, because quite a lot of people asked for them after the event, we've got them all saved. So just DM me or Nicole, and we can get those webinars sent over to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.